Some early thoughts on the national championship game, Miami, Indiana. All right, so the outcome obviously gives us a memorable story. It gives a national championship to a program that, in Indiana's case, no one ever thought could win one. In Miami's case, people said couldn't win one anymore. Somehow the sport had passed them by. Like, I never really understood that train of thought. Then there were other people who thought Mario Cristobal couldn't win it. I got where they were going, even if I disagreed with them. So we're going to get a memorable story either way. But more so than the storyline business, this is kind of the football business, and we're looking at a football game. So I had some questions I wrote down. First question, can Carson Beck play a clean game? What he did on the last drive, for instance, against Ole Miss, you bottle that up, that's good enough to win a national championship. That's good enough to beat Indiana. Now, it's asking a lot to get that for 4 quarters. I will grant you that. Indiana, number 1 team in the country in turnover margin. They're averaging 1.5 of them per game. And so Carson Beck, in those 2 losses they had earlier this year, one of which we were on hand for, the other one was Louisville, he had 6 interceptions combined in those 2 losses. I don't think it's the most groundbreaking padlock stat in the world to understand if you turn over the ball, especially against Indiana, you're going to lose the game. But it all boils down to also, for me, what Miami needs him to do. Because Indiana's really good at forcing teams to feel like they need to do 120% of what they normally do, or they need to do something above and beyond what they normally do. And to beat Indiana, frankly, most teams do need to do something above and beyond what they normally do. But if you've made it to the national championship game, you got to believe that your best is good enough. You got to believe Carson Beck's best is good enough. So that's the first question. Second question, will Indiana's offensive line win against Miami? So the other night at the semifinal game, the Peach Bowl, down there in Atlanta, which I'm still worried about being deposed as a witness to. It was tough to watch. What they did to Oregon is tough to watch. But it's the first time I'd seen Indiana in person this year, and I think ever. And, boy, it's impressive to watch their offensive line. So just the technical efficiency, I don't really care if you coach the offensive line position, if you've played the offensive line position. Of course, you guys could look at what they're doing and marvel at it. I think we could pull someone off the street who's never watched a down of American football and show them a Saturday's worth of games and then turn on an Indiana game, and even they'd be impressed by it. And they don't really even know the names of the positions, but they're like, wow, they just look like they're doing whatever it is they're supposed to do at a little bit higher level than everyone else. Yup, that's about the only breakdown you need. So our buddies over at College Football Nerds put out a tweet that I wanted to read to you, because it's really what I'm talking about here. Will Indiana's offensive line win against Miami? Twofold, obviously, run blocking, pass pro. But they put out something that I kind of go back to in my own mind. And it's Indiana versus, the Iowas of the world, the Penn States of the world. Earlier this year, you just kind of Ohio State. You're thinking back to anyone who kind of took Indiana to the limit, took them to the 4th quarter. No one's beaten them yet. We really don't know what it takes to beat them. But our buddies at College Football Nerds put out a stat and said if you look at their season, in all the close games, Penn State, Iowa, Ohio State, Indiana was held under 3.5 yards per carry. Every time Indiana ran for 4 yards per carry versus a Power 4 team, they won by 25 plus. Okay, so basically we're asking, what kind of clip do they run it at against Miami? That's the first part. The second part is, it'll probably be the best pass rush I would imagine Indiana's seen all year. So I'm not sitting here doubting their offensive line. I've learned my lesson there. But I do wonder, to what degree do they have success against Miami? Third question, can Miami prevent Indiana explosive plays? Stopping the run with 4 would help a lot there. Indiana does it all the time. But, you could do it against them as well. Miami has been able to do that conditionally, just at times this year. Ole Miss, sort of an interesting number here. Ole Miss had 8 passes of 15-plus yards. They had that big cat buster run as well. Man, look, all I'm saying is when I was watching Indiana against Oregon the other night, one of Oregon's big problems was turning the ball over, but the other problem they had was Fernando Mendoza was just dealing. And he was making some NFL Sunday throws. And so when you got that recipe, if you didn't turn the ball over, he's probably beating you. If he's in that kind of rhythm, he's in that kind of zone. But Indiana has several capable receivers. Becker coming on to the nation. He's kind of come on second half of the year. There's no shutting down one guy and then crowbarring their offense to a halt. So How much can you limit their explosives? I wonder if Miami's ground game is going to be there. And it has been. This entire postseason, Miami's been able to run the ball. They've run it 150 plus each college football playoff game. They did it on the road against A&M, and then the bigger test was going to be Ohio State, and they did it against Ohio State. They did it against Ole Miss. You going to do it against Indiana? Quick 5-second timeout. Check and make sure you're subscribed to the channel. It keeps it free. We love you. All right, back to the show. That kind of circles back around to the first thing I asked about Carson Beck playing a clean game. This number is starting to circulate a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and read it on the show right now. I promise you're going to hear this 1 or 2 dozen times between now and kickoff. Indiana's defensive line averages 278 yards. Indiana's defensive line averages 278 pounds. Miami's offensive line averages 331. Again, you're going to hear it over and over and over again. Now, the more you hear a stat does not render it less relevant, but what I've come to find is the more and more the general public starts to latch on to a stat, the more and more you're watching the game and talking about it less and less. I don't know. That just sometimes seems to be the way it works. So the other thing about facing Indiana is a lot of teams don't get to stick to the run because they put you behind the 8 ball and you got to throw the ball to catch up, and then everything just goes horribly wrong. So Penn State is the closest comp that I can see because Penn State stayed within reach. Penn State took the lead on them. So the game was played pretty balanced. It was played pretty straight up. Penn State had 33 carries for 117 yards. Now, I think if you told Indiana right now, you're going to hold Miami to 117 yards, they wouldn't be happy with it because in their mind, they think they can do better than that. So maybe instead of telling them, tell me that they're going to hold Miami to 117, I think Indiana's won that football game. That's just my hunch. I think they got a 70-30 shot or better at winning that game. So it greatly behooves Miami to top that 117, maybe even top 150 like they have every game. And then lastly, to just go full intangible mode, who gets impacted by the moment more? This is a national championship game after all. It's the first time either of these coaching staffs have been in this kind of arena. It's the first time these coaching staffs and these rosters have really been in this kind of arena. I know some of them have transferred. Like Carson Beck's played some big games, but man, this is the biggest game of everyone's life. It's just no need to sugarcoat that, or I guess we are sugarcoating it, but that's reality. Now that does some funny things to get guys sometimes, and other times it just serves as a mechanism to further lock guys in, and you don't really know until you're there. I listen to people talk about being veterans of the NFL and playing 10, 11 years, finally you get to your first Super Bowl, and they talk about how it felt. Well, that's the same way in college, except no one's a veteran in college. No player's a veteran. I mean, and I'm even speaking about the era of the Carson Becks, who were 5th and 6th year players. Man, that's the closest we get to veteran college football players. And hardly any of them have played in a national championship game. So I'm looking at the uncharacteristic decisions and mistakes. Miami was heavily penalized last game. They had done a good job up until last game of limiting those. But as for the entire season, you're looking at a team in Indiana that was number 2 in the country in penalty yards per game. Miami was 85th. I also know a lot's going to be made of home field. It is a big deal to me that Miami gets to play in their home building. But as for the home field advantage, I witnessed Indiana take over Atlanta like Atlanta hasn't been taken over since Sherman. I was trying to get my history in order in my head. They took that place over. I don't think Indiana's going to be outnumbered in Miami. I don't care that it is Miami's home building. I've looked at SeatGeek. I got a big deal for you later, by the way. If you're looking to buy tickets, don't buy them yet. I got a big deal for you. Buy them in like an hour. So those are just some early thoughts from me. We're going to obviously pick the game as the game gets closer. But right now, Indiana, a 7.5-point favorite. 7.5. And just for the record, I did hit up our friends at FanDuel and I said, let's go back to week 1. Pretend these teams played, let's say, in Nashville in week 1. Neutral field, Indiana, Miami. What would the number have been? Before I tell you, what would you guess, by the way? Think back. This is week 1, not week 13 or 14. They told me they would have put Miami minus 6.5 on the board. It is now Indiana minus 7.5 once we have the actual game. So about a 2-touchdown swing in odds-making perception. Does that mean anything when the game kicks off? No, it does not. I just thought it would be of some interest to you.